With President Trump's recent meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska, and then the summit with Vladimir Zelenskyy and the European leaders this week in Washington, what are the chances of a peace deal? With analysis, I'm joined by defense and geopolitical analyst John Rossomando. John, thanks for being here. Look, on Tuesday night, despite talks between the U.S., Russia, Moscow continued its aerial bombardment of Ukraine, including an overnight attack that targeted oil and port facilities in Odessa. Zelenskyy said on Wednesday that more than 60 drones and ballistic missiles were fired across Ukraine overnight. Your thoughts on this, particularly following this much ballyhooed meeting between Trump and Putin in Alaska? What was gained, if anything?
Well, I think that it was a start. You know, you always have a start of a conversation. I think that Putin is trying to get what he can get on the battlefield so that he gets the most favorable terms of any sort of peace agreement that he can get with Zelenskyy.
Mm-hmm. Give me a sense of, are we going to have a land swap here? I mean, and I want you to talk about the history of Ukraine. There's a huge misunderstanding here, John. I mean, this was essentially a Russian satellite for many, many, many years, since what, 1870-something or 1890-something. Then the Soviet Union falls, and Ukraine declares its independence. Speak for a moment about the history here, the territory. The Russians say this is Russian territory.
Well, if you look at Ukraine's remote history, it was Kiev and Rus, you know, which the Russians see as the cradle of their civilization. The Ukrainians, say, no, you're the Muscovites and so forth. But really, the Ukrainian identity was formed by the fact it was part of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth until the time of Catherine the Great, when it was annexed. Right. And Ukraine means in the Slavic language the frontier. So the Russians, don't view Ukraine as, it's like, the U.S. losing Pennsylvania or something like that in their Russian psyche. I mean, Sun Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, said, you have to understand how your opponent thinks in order to beat them. We're not trying to do that.
And Putin wants to put together the old Soviet Union. That's really what he's trying to restore. I mean, he sees himself as a successor to Peter the Great.
Absolutely, not just the Soviet Union, a successor to the Tsarist Russian Empire. You look at the uniforms that Putin's Presidential Guard wears. They're basically the guards of Alexander III from the 19th century. The Russian Navy has restored some of the orders that were given in the Tsarist period.
But you already have Trump coming out and saying Ukraine is not getting Crimea. Crimea was the island, as you mentioned, Catherine the Great invaded it in the 1800s. But Putin moved in 2012 during Obama's presidency, and nobody did anything. That was Crimea. He had it. He's got it. And so Trump is saying you're not going to get Crimea back. And Zelenskyy, you're not going to join NATO. Your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts is Trump is doing the pragmatic thing, because one thing people are talking about is all the hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed on the battlefield, the damage to the Russian economy. Yeah. Ideology trumps any sort of reasoned dialogue. As far as Putin's idea, this is part of the Russian Empire. I mean, after 2014, he was talking about Novorossiya, which was a part of Ottoman Turkey that was seized by Catherine the Great. That is part of Russia, and referring to everything. That's all the area pretty much that Putin occupies in eastern and southern Ukraine.
The Donbass, the Crimea. They're talking about security guarantees that are going to be a big part of this. President Trump said Tuesday U.S. troops would not be sent to defend Ukraine against Russia, though he did leave open the possibility of some kind of coalition force of Europeans and the U.S. to protect the border of Ukraine. Are we headed to another DMZ zone like Korea?
Well, I think that's what we're going to end up seeing, because you have a situation where Putin is not going to pull out. The Ukrainians will not recognize under their constitution the loss of what Putin refers to as Novorossiya. And, you'll probably have the Europeans in there indefinitely, and us throwing weapons at the Ukrainian army so that it can hold out against a Russian follow-up invasion.
President Zelenskyy made sure to show his gratitude repeatedly to President Trump during that Oval Office meeting on Monday. 9 times I counted. He thanked Trump. That was in the first minute of his public address, okay? I guess after his last disastrous Oval Office visit, he kind of learned the approach here. What do you make of that cadre of European leaders that were there? And aside from optics, what did their participation achieve or not?
Well, I think that their participation achieved trying to build consensus with Europeans who are terrified of a Russian invasion. I mean, Sweden had not fought a war in 200 years, yet as a result of its invasion, the Ukraine invasion, it joined NATO. Finland was neutral throughout all the Cold War. It joined NATO. So basically, it's a way of Trump trying to reassure the Europeans that they will not be forgotten and they will not face a Russian invasion if they go along with whatever he is trying to put together.
Putin seems cold to the entire idea of a bilateral meeting with Zelenskyy now. So where are we at this point? Do the sanctions go on? There were promised sanctions that Trump, he's been pounding them and beating them with sanctions that has damaged. I mean, this is a ragged economy in Russia, but it doesn't seem to be softening Putin up.
Well, ideology, like I said, Raymond, we're not talking about somebody who has a rational ideology. We're talking about, I mean, it's on par with communism, you know, during the Soviet era. I mean, they put, no matter how bad their economy got, they kept pushing, you know, communism. Putin is pushing this Slavophile, pan-Slavic nationalism that the Tsars promoted in the 19th century.
Yeah, the restoration of the empire. And that's a missing piece here. I think people just don't get that. That hasn't sunk in. What's really driving him? And that these sanctions, all of this may not deter him either. Pope Leo's called for a day of prayer and fasting on August 22nd for peace. He's asking people to join in prayer. Hopefully that will bear some fruit. Let's talk about Ukraine and the impact this is having on Ukrainian Catholics and those in the Eastern Church. What's happening there?
Well, let me just give you a little hit. Our viewers probably aren't familiar with the Ukrainian Catholic Church. It was a Eastern Orthodox that joined with Rome in the 16th century. They were banned by Stalin. In the areas of Ukraine that are occupied by Russia, the Catholic Church has been banned, and priests have been imprisoned in favor of the Russian Orthodox Church, which I would implore President Trump to bring to Putin's attention to free the Catholic Church in eastern Ukraine.
You know, this is the same routine Catherine the Great pulled. When she moved into Crimea, they brought the Russian faith and expelled all the largely Muslim Tartars who were there, right?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing people don't understand is the Russian way of war, the Russian mentality, you know, great Russia.
No cultural occupation in addition to, you know, fearsome warriors. Now, this week, Israel launched a new offensive in Gaza City. In the midst of a starvation crisis in the region, more than 62,000 people have been killed during Israel's offensive so far. This is according to Gaza's health ministry, and the ministry is part of the Hamas-run government. It's unclear how many of those people are civilians or combatants. They say half of them are women and children. In addition to that toll, hundreds have died of malnutrition-related causes since the start of this war. Israel's military said Wednesday that it will call up 60,000 reservists ahead of an expanded military operation in Gaza. John, peace seems remote by the day.
Well, I think that when it comes to a lot of the statistics, we're dealing with the fog of war. You know, we don't know how many people have died because Hamas, according to a University of Pennsylvania statistician, uses fake numbers. And we don't know, you know, the Israelis have, you know, their propaganda.
Yeah, they have a different set of numbers.
So it's just sort of like, it's hard to know, but at the same time, we have to look at the human suffering. I mean, and Hamas is a savage and sadistic organization. The thing about all the tunnels they built under schools, under hospitals, and use human shields. I mean, it's horrible, you know, the bombings that the Israelis have, you know, done that have harmed innocent civilians, but we also have to look who is responsible for bringing that. Hamas doesn't want to give up the hostages.
Mm-hmm. No, it's horrible. I want to get your take as a counterterrorism expert on what we're seeing on the southern border. The Trump administration has targeted these drug cartels, which have already been designated as terrorist organizations. Not to mention that situation between the U.S. and Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro is calling up more than 4 million militia members down there to counter the threat of U.S. action. After the Trump administration more than doubled the bounty on Maduro. I want to play what Marco Rubio told me a few weeks ago. Listen to this. Your State Department designated 6 cartels in Latin America as terrorist organizations. How did that change the interaction between these cartels and the United States, and who made that decision? How
Well,
did
the president makes a
come to
decision,
that?
on our recommendation. Here's the thing: we cannot continue to just treat these guys as local street gangs. Mm-hmm. They have weaponry that looks like what terrorists, in some cases, armies have. They control territory in many cases. Those cartels extend from the Maduro regime in Venezuela, which is not a legitimate government. We don't recognize the Maduro regime as legitimate. It is a criminal enterprise, all the way to the various different cartels that operate in Mexico. And in between, you find them in Ecuador, you find them in Guatemala, you find TDA, what people would call street gangs, but actually are operating as criminal enterprises, but very well organized ones. So what it changes is it gives us legal authorities to target them in ways you can't do if they're just a bunch of criminals. It's no longer a law enforcement issue. It becomes a national security issue.
Has it changed their behavior at all?
Well, I don't know if it's changed their behavior yet, but their behavior is going to have to change one way or another. But it allows us to now target what they're operating and to use other elements of American power, intelligence agencies, the Department of Defense, whatever, to target these groups if we have an opportunity to do it. We have to start treating them as armed terrorist organizations, not simply drug dealing organizations. Drug dealing is the kind of terrorism they're doing, and it's not the only. You know, they're also into human trafficking, they smuggle anything, and there's been nascent cooperation between them and some international terrorist organizations in the past, which pose an ongoing danger to the United States.
Your reaction?
Well, my reaction is that, Maduro is a good part of the problem that we have with the migrant flows. And also, Maduro is allied with Russia and with China and with Iran. So this is, the nexus of what we're seeing overseas. We have a lot of people in America who say, we shouldn't be worried about, China, Russia, it's not our Iran, it's not our thing. But they're manipulating them. They're involved in the drug trafficking. Iran takes drugs from Afghanistan, brings it through Venezuela, and we have to deal with this problem. And the one thing that people I've talked to in the intelligence community, current and former, worry that we carry out attacks against the cartels in Mexico. We're going to start seeing attacks inside the U.S. like Mexico faces now.
Do you foresee special forces dropping in on these cartels in Mexico and in Venezuela?
I'll just say if President Trump orders it, yes. But then we also have to be prepared for the blowback on American soil. Our police need to be paying attention. The CIA and our intelligence agencies need to keep local law enforcement informed about what is going on, because this can really get out of hand.
Speaking of local law enforcement, I want to talk about what's happening here in D.C. FBI Director Kash Patel said on Wednesday on X, 550 people have been arrested in Washington, D.C. since Trump federalized the Metropolitan Police Department. Now, John, the problem is the federal presence is usually temporary. I mean, we saw that in L.A., we saw it in my native New Orleans. Once the guard goes, crime kind of returns to normal, and Trump is doing a ride-along with law enforcement tonight, by the way.
Well, I think that, somebody has lived in the D.C. area for more than 20 years, who lived through the D.C. riots in 2020. You used to be able to go to your CVS and not have things locked up. Now everything is locked up. You have, people down in Navy Yard, that was the up-and-coming neighborhood, being raped, murdered,
carjacked,
and so forth. It's, sad to see this, but you've had Muriel Bowser in the Democratic-led city council that has allowed this. They reduced the hours for their police, and now we're getting the results of their lousy governance, and President Trump is having to step in to be the adult in the room.
Yeah, well, he can do that in the district because it's a federal territory. But I'm not sure about bringing the National Guard to other cities that have their own, municipal government.
Well, I think that's certainly something that I don't know that I would consider.
Yeah.
But I think that President Trump needs to be working with the local Democratic politicians to bring them to Washington and have a summit about solving the crime problem, because you have cities in this country where it's out of hand.
Yeah, like national security, public safety should not be a partisan issue. It isn't a partisan issue, and it's sad that it becomes one. John, thank you so much.
Thank you, man.